Commander Sarah Chen stood on the bridge of the colony's ship New Horizon, watching the massive alien vessel appear on their screens. The ship was 3 times larger than anything humanity had ever built, its dark purple hull covered in strange symbols that seemed to glow with their own light. Behind it, dozens of smaller ships moved in perfect formation, like a school of deadly fish swimming through the black ocean of space. "Captain, they're sending a message," reported Lieutenant Torres from the communication station. His voice was steady, but Sarah could see the tension in his shoulders. "Put it through," Sarah ordered, straightening her uniform. Whatever was about to happen, she would face it with dignity. The main screen flickered, and suddenly Sarah was looking at something that would haunt her dreams for weeks to come. The alien stood nearly 8 feet tall, its body covered in what looked like living armor that shifted colors from deep purple to black. 6 eyes arranged in 2 rows stared at her with cold intelligence while tentacles writhed where a human mouth should be. "I am Ambassador Veltar of the Zephyrian Collective," the creature spoke, its voice somehow translated into perfect English. "You will listen carefully to what I say, as I will say it only once." Sarah nodded slowly. "I'm listening, Ambassador. Your species has entered territory claimed by the Zephyrian Collective. The Kepler 442 system and all planets within it belong to us by right of conquest. Your presence here is an act of trespass that we cannot allow." The alien paused, letting its words sink in. Around the bridge, Sarah's crew exchanged worried glances. They had traveled for 5 years to reach this system, carrying 15,000 colonists in cold sleep. This was supposed to be humanity's new home. However, Veltar continued, "The collective is not unreasonable. We understand that your species is young and perhaps unaware of galactic law. Therefore, we offer you this opportunity. Turn your ships around immediately and return to your home system. Abandon any claims to Kepler 442 and all worlds within 50 light-years of our territory." Sarah felt her heart sink, but she kept her expression neutral. "And if we refuse?" The alien's 6 eyes seemed to focus more intently on her. "Then you will face the consequences of defying the collective. We have conquered 47 species, Commander Chen. Some chose wisdom and submitted peacefully. Others chose foolishness and were removed from existence entirely. The choice is yours." Behind the ambassador, Sarah could see other aliens moving around what was clearly a warship's bridge. Each one looked different from Veltar, representing different species that had been absorbed into this collective. Some had multiple arms, others had scales instead of skin, and one appeared to be made entirely of living crystal. All of them stared at the human ship with the same cold contempt. "You have 30 standard galactic days to make your decision," Veltar announced. "Gather your leaders, consult your councils, pray to whatever gods your species worships. In 30 days we will return for your answer. Choose wisely, humans. The collective has never been refused, and we do not intend to start with you." The transmission ended, leaving Sarah staring at a blank screen. The bridge fell silent except for the gentle hum of the ship's engines and the soft beeping of various monitors. Everyone was looking at her, waiting for orders, waiting for her to somehow solve this impossible situation. "Captain," whispered Dr. Martinez, the colony's chief scientist. "What are we going to do? We can't fight something like that. Look at the size of their ships." Sarah walked to the main viewport and stared out at the alien fleet. Even at this distance, the ships looked enormous and threatening. Their weapons ports glowed with an ominous red light, and she could see more vessels arriving every few minutes. The collective wasn't just making threats. They had the power to back up every word. "Torres, send a message to Earth immediately," Sarah ordered. "Priority Alpha. Include all sensor data on these alien ships and a complete recording of our conversation with their ambassador." "Yes, Captain. But it will take 5 years for the message to reach home, and another 5 for any response to get back to us." Sarah nodded grimly. "I know. But Earth needs to know what's out here." She turned back to face her crew. "Dr. Martinez, wake the Colonial Council. They need to be briefed on the situation immediately. Lieutenant Hayes, I want a complete analysis of those alien ships. Find out everything you can about their weapons, their technology, their capabilities." "Captain," interrupted Torres, "the aliens are moving away. Looks like they're taking position at the edge of the system." Sarah watched as the massive fleet slowly withdrew, leaving just a few scout ships to monitor the human vessels. The message was clear. "We'll be watching you." Over the next few days, the New Horizon became a hub of frantic activity. The Colonial Council met constantly, debating their options. Some wanted to flee immediately, arguing that no planet was worth extinction. Others insisted they should stand their ground. Humanity had come too far to give up now. Sarah found herself caught, in the middle, trying to balance hope against reality. The colonists had given up everything on Earth for a chance at a new life. Many had sold their possessions, said goodbye to family members they would never see again, and spent 5 years in cold sleep dreaming of green fields under alien suns. But the alternative was unthinkable. The Zephyrian fleet could destroy them, all without breaking stride. Sarah had seen enough science fiction movies to know how these stories usually ended for the smaller, weaker species. "Perhaps we could negotiate," suggested Council Chairman Roberts during one particularly heated meeting. "Maybe there's another system nearby they would allow us to colonize." "Did you see those ships?" Dr. Martinez shot back. "Did you hear what that alien said? They've conquered 47 species. This isn't about negotiation. It's about submission." Sarah listened to the arguments but said little. Her mind was focused on the message she had sent to Earth, racing through space at light speed toward a home she would never see again. What would humanity's leaders say when they learned about the Zephyrian collective? Would they prepare for war, or would they simply write off the Kepler 442 colony as an acceptable loss? As the days passed, Sarah noticed that the alien ships were conducting regular patrols around the system. They seemed to be cataloging everything: the positions of the human ships, their capabilities, even their daily routines. It was like being studied by scientists preparing for an experiment. On the 25th day, Sarah stood alone on the observation deck, watching Kepler 442b rotate slowly in the distance. It was a beautiful world, with blue oceans and white clouds that reminded her of Earth. The survey probes had found vast continents ready for settlement, with soil that could support Earth crops and an atmosphere that humans could breathe without artificial aids. "Captain?" Torres appeared beside her holding a datapad. "The alien ambassador is requesting another communication." Sarah sighed. "Put him through to my ready room, and Torres, record everything." 5 minutes later, she was once again facing the imposing figure of Ambassador Veltar. "Have you made your decision, Commander Chen?" the alien asked without preamble. Sarah looked directly into his 6 eyes. "We need more time to consult with our government." "Time is a luxury you do not possess. Give me your answer now." Sarah felt something cold settle in her stomach, but she kept her voice steady. "My answer is this, Ambassador. Message received. Humanity will provide its answer in due time." Veltar's tentacles writhed with what might have been anger or amusement. "Very well. You have 5 more days. Do not test our patience further." The transmission ended, leaving Sarah alone with the weight of 15,000 lives on her shoulders. She had just bought humanity a little more time, but time for what? Even if Earth had received her message, there was no way they could send help across 5 light years in 5 days. All she could do now was wait, and hope that somewhere in the vast darkness between stars help was already on the way. The Galactic Council chamber buzzed with nervous energy, as representatives from dozens of species gathered to witness what they all expected would be humanity's surrender. The massive circular room, carved from a single asteroid and floating in neutral space, had seen many such moments over the centuries. It was where the weak came to beg for mercy, where the proud learned to bow, where entire civilizations signed away their freedom to avoid extinction. Counselor Vexhai, a tall insectoid being with 4 arms and golden chitin, clicked his mandibles anxiously as he reviewed the intelligence reports. "The humans sent only colony ships to Kepler 442, he buzzed to his aide. "No military escort, no defensive platforms. They are clearly a peaceful species unprepared for galactic realities." Near the center of the chamber, Ambassador Veltar stood with his usual confidence. The Zephyrian collective had never failed to get what they wanted through diplomatic pressure backed by overwhelming force. Around him, other collective representatives whispered among themselves, already discussing how to divide the human territories once this unpleasant business was concluded. "I still think this is unnecessary," muttered Counselor Theus, her blue-scaled form shifting nervously in her hover chair. The Aquarian delegate had some sympathy for younger species, having once been in a similar position herself. "The humans have shown no aggressive tendencies. Perhaps we could find them another system to colonize." The room fell silent as Veltar's 6 eyes fixed on her. "The collective's claim to that region of space is absolute," he said coldly. "We cannot show weakness by making exceptions, even for seemingly harmless species. Others might get similar ideas." A low chime sounded throughout the chamber, indicating that long-range sensors had detected an approaching vessel. The main display screen activated, showing a view of space where a single small dot was growing slowly larger. Just one ship? Counselor Vexhai seemed surprised. That's unusual. Most species at least send a diplomatic convoy. Perhaps they're surrendering immediately, suggested another delegate. Some species realize quickly that resistance is futile, but as minutes passed and the ship drew closer, something seemed wrong with the sensor readings. The vessel's energy signature kept fluctuating wildly, sometimes appearing as a small courier ship, other times showing power levels that seemed impossible for something of its apparent size. Are the sensors malfunctioning? Asked Theiss, her voice betraying growing concern. The technician operating the display shook his multiple heads. No, Counselor. We're running full diagnostics, but all systems show green. The readings are accurate. That's impossible, Veltar snapped. No ship that small could generate those energy levels. The physics don't work. On the screen, the approaching vessel continued to grow larger, but something about its movement seemed strange. It wasn't following a normal approach vector. Instead, it moved with a fluid grace that seemed to ignore the usual limitations of momentum and gravity. Space around it seemed to shimmer slightly, like heat waves rising from hot pavement. Wait, whispered the technician, his voice filled with disbelief. I'm detecting some kind of cloaking field, a massive one. The chamber erupted in confused murmurs. Cloaking technology was known to exist, but nothing on the scale the sensors were suggesting. The energy requirements alone should have been impossible, for anything smaller than a moon-sized battle station. Veltar moved closer to the display, his tentacles writhing with agitation. Show me everything, he demanded. Full spectrum analysis. The screen split into multiple views, showing the approaching vessel from every possible angle and sensor type. Gravitational detectors showed massive distortions in space-time. Energy, sensors registered power outputs that defied known engineering principles. Mass detectors gave readings that changed from moment to moment, as if reality itself couldn't decide how big the ship actually was. This isn't possible, muttered Counselor Vexhai, his mandibles clicking rapidly with stress. No known species has technology like this. The humans are a young species, Veltar said, but his voice lacked its usual confidence. They've barely left their home system. They couldn't have developed anything like this. On the screen, the mysterious vessel finally dropped out of its approach vector, taking position exactly 1 million kilometers from the council chamber. For a moment, nothing happened. Then space itself seemed to fold and twist around the ship. The cloaking field collapsed. What appeared on the screen made every delegate in the chamber fall silent. Where moments before there had been a single small vessel, now hung something that redefined their understanding of naval architecture. The ship was enormous, easily the size of a small moon, its hull dark and angular, covered in weapons ports and sensor arrays that looked like the eyes of some enormous predator. By the void, whispered Theiss, her scales turning pale with shock. What is that thing? But the massive vessel wasn't alone. As they watched in stunned silence, space around it began to ripple and shimmer. More ships were decloaking. Dozens of them, each one clearly built for war. Some were sleek and fast-looking, others were massive and heavily armored, but all of them radiated an aura of deadly competence that made the chamber's environmental systems work harder to maintain proper atmospheric levels. Fleet composition analysis complete, announced the technician in a shaking voice. 200 vessels total. Energy signatures suggest each ship carries firepower equivalent to an entire collective battle group. Veltar staggered, backward, his confidence finally cracking. The Zephyrian collective maintained over 10,000 ships scattered across their territory, but most of them were older designs, built for intimidating primitive species rather than actual warfare. What hung before them now looked like it had been designed by beings who understood violence on a fundamental level. The communications array activated, and suddenly the chamber was filled with a voice that was calm, professional, and absolutely terrifying in its quiet confidence. Greetings, Galactic Council. This is Admiral Elizabeth Reyes of the Human Defense Fleet, commanding the battleship Indomitable Will. You asked for humanity's answer to the Zephyrian Collective's ultimatum. The voice paused, and every being in the chamber held their breath. Here it is. On the screen, the human fleet began to move into formation. The massive flagship took position at the center, while smaller vessels spread out in a pattern that spoke of tactical expertise, developed through countless battles. Their movements were precise, coordinated, and utterly professional. Counselor Vexhai found his voice first. This This changes everything if the humans possess such technology, such firepower. Why did they send defenseless colony ships to Kepler 442? Thais interrupted. If they have ships like these, why not send a military escort? The answer came from an unexpected source. A new voice spoke from the human fleet, younger than the admirals but carrying the same quiet authority. Because we hoped we wouldn't need them, said Commander Sarah Chen. We came in peace, seeking only a new home for our people. We believed that would be enough. On the screen, the human ships continued their deployment, taking positions that would allow them to engage any threat from multiple angles simultaneously. It was a formation that spoke of beings who had studied warfare not as a hobby, but as a survival necessity. The collective has 30 minutes to withdraw all forces from the Kepler 4042 system, Admiral Reyes announced. Any ship remaining after that time will be considered hostile and dealt with accordingly. Veltar finally found his voice again, though it cracked with strain. You cannot be serious. The collective maintains over 10,000 vessels. You have only 200. Yes, the Admiral replied simply. We're aware of the odds. The casual dismissal of what should have been an overwhelming numerical disadvantage sent a chill through the chamber. These humans weren't boasting or bluffing. They were simply stating facts as they understood them. This is madness, Veltar snarled, his composure finally breaking completely. No species fights the collective and survives. We have conquered 47 civilizations. Congratulations, Admiral Reyes said dryly. We've been keeping track of your activities. 29 minutes remaining. The display showed the human fleet continuing their deployment, weapons systems charging with barely contained energy. Each ship moved with the fluid precision of a pack hunter, and watching them work together was like watching a single organism with 200 deadly appendages. Council session is adjourned, announced Vexhai hastily. All delegates are advised to withdraw to minimum safe distance immediately. As representatives scrambled for their ships and the chamber began to empty, Thais lingered for a moment, staring at the impossible sight on the display. 47 species had fallen to the Zephyrian collective through intimidation and overwhelming numbers. But as she watched the human fleet prepare for battle with calm professionalism, she couldn't shake the feeling that everything was about to change. For the first time in centuries, someone had told the collective no, and had the power to make it stick. The galaxy would never be the same. Admiral Elizabeth Reyes stood on the bridge of the Indomitable Will, her hands clasped behind her back as she watched the chaos unfolding on the diplomatic channels. The Galactic Council chamber was emptying fast, with delegates scrambling to reach their ships and flee to what they hoped would be a safe distance. She couldn't blame them. When diplomacy failed and big guns came out, smart people got out of the way. Admiral, called Commander Torres from the communication station. We're receiving priority broadcasts from at least 30 different species. Most are requesting safe passage through the area. A few are asking if we need assistance. Elizabeth raised an eyebrow. Assistance? Apparently, some of the smaller species have been waiting for someone to stand up to the collective. They're offering intelligence on Zephyrian fleet positions and defensive capabilities. Interesting. File those for later review. What's the status of the collective fleet in the Kepler system? Still holding position at the edge of the system, ma'am. Approximately 8,000 vessels of various classes. They've been reinforcing steadily since we began our approach. Elizabeth nodded calmly. The Zephyrian collective had impressive numbers. She had to give them that. But numbers weren't everything, as they were about to learn. She touched her command tablet, bringing up the tactical display that showed both fleets in detail. Signal the fleet, she ordered. Deploy to combat formation Delta 7, Genesis-class carriers to the rear, Sol Guard squadrons to take point positions. Around the flagship, space came alive with movement as 200 of humanity's finest warships moved into their assigned positions. Each vessel was a masterpiece of human engineering and determination, built with technologies that most of the galaxy couldn't even imagine. The Indomitable Will itself was a marvel that defied galactic understanding of physics and engineering. At over 15 kilometers in length, it was essentially a mobile fortress, capable of manufacturing its own ammunition, carrying its own fighter squadrons, and generating enough power to supply a small planet. Its armor was made from materials that human scientists had learned to create in the zero-point energy fields found only in the hearts of dying stars. Sir, reported Lieutenant Hayes from the sensor station, we're getting some interesting readings from the collective fleet. Their ships are, well, they're not exactly what I expected. Explain. Hayes manipulated his display, zooming in on various collective vessels. Most of their fleet appears to be older designs, probably built decades ago. The armor is thick but primitive. The weapons are powerful but inefficient. They've clearly been designed to intimidate rather than fight a peer opponent. Elizabeth studied the readouts with professional interest. The Zephyrian strategy was becoming clear. Build big, impressive-looking ships that could cow primitive species into submission without actually having to fight. It was an effective approach when dealing with civilizations that had barely mastered spaceflight but had had some serious weaknesses. What about their flagship, she asked. The Dominion's Wrath, sir. 2 kilometers long, heavily armored, carrying what looks like enough firepower to glass a planet. But Hayes paused, running more detailed scans. The power distribution is inefficient. The armor has weak points where the different sections connect, and their weapon systems appear to be designed more for bombardment than ship-to-ship combat. In other words, it's built to terrify defenseless colonies, not fight a real naval battle. Yes, sir, that appears to be accurate. Elizabeth allowed herself a small smile. The collective had made the classic mistake of believing their own propaganda. They'd gotten so used to easy victories over helpless opponents that they'd forgotten what real warfare looked like. Sir, interrupted Torres. Incoming transmission from the collective flagship. Ambassador Veltar is requesting immediate communication. Put him through. The main screen flickered, revealing the familiar figure of the Zephyrian ambassador. But where before he had radiated cold confidence, now Veltar looked distinctly uncomfortable. His 6 eyes darted around the human bridge, taking in the calm professionalism of the crew and the advanced technology visible in every corner. Admiral Reyes, he began, his voice lacking its usual commanding tone. I believe there has been a misunderstanding. The collective has no desire for unnecessary bloodshed. I'm glad to hear that, Elizabeth replied evenly. Then you'll have no problem withdrawing your forces from the Kepler 442 system immediately. The system is legally claimed territory of the collective. However, we are prepared to discuss alternative arrangements, perhaps a division of the system, or compensation for our territorial rights. Elizabeth studied the alien for a moment, noting the subtle signs of stress in his posture. The tentacles around his mouth were moving in rapid, nervous patterns, and his armor was shifting colors more rapidly than before. Ambassador, she said calmly, let me be very clear about something. The Kepler 442 system was unclaimed when our colony ships arrived. Your people showed up afterward and demanded we leave. That's not a legal claim. That's attempted piracy. The collective has maintained sovereignty over that region of space for over 2 centuries. According to whose authority? The Galactic Council recognizes no such claim, and neither do we. You've simply been bullying weaker species into avoiding the area. Veltar's armor flushed deep purple with anger. Your species is young and ignorant of galactic realities. The collective commands the respect of dozens of civilizations. We have conquered 47 species, Elizabeth interrupted. Yes, you mentioned that. Most of them barely had interstellar capability when you arrived. Tell me, Ambassador, how many of those species actually fought back? The question hung in the air like a challenge. Around the bridge, Elizabeth's crew continued their preparations with quiet efficiency, but she could sense their attention focused on this conversation. Resistance was minimal, Veltar admitted finally. Most species chose wisdom over destruction. Most species were defenseless and had no choice, but were not most species. On the tactical display, Elizabeth could see the human fleet completing its deployment. The massive carriers Genesis and New Eden had moved to the rear, their launch bays opening to reveal squadrons of fighters unlike anything the galaxy had ever seen. The Sol Guard's elite squadrons, the same ships that had defended Earth during the Centauri uprising, took positions at the fleet's edge, their sleek hulls practically humming with barely contained energy. Your ships are impressive, Veltar said, clearly trying to regain some composure. But you face overwhelming numbers. 10,000 ships against 200. Even with superior technology, those odds are impossible. Elizabeth smiled, and for the first time since the conversation began, she looked genuinely amused. Ambassador, you're making a common mistake. You're assuming this is our entire fleet. The alien's 6 eyes widened. What do you mean? This is our diplomatic fleet. We sent it because we hoped negotiations might still be possible. She paused, letting that sink in. Our actual war fleet is somewhat larger. It was technically true, though misleading. The human fleet numbered in the thousands, but most of those ships were scattered across dozens of star systems, protecting colonies and trade routes. What Elizabeth had brought to the Kepler system represented the best of the best. The ships and crews that could handle any threat the galaxy might offer. "You're bluffing," Veltar said, but his voice lacked conviction. "Am I? Would you like to find out?" Before the ambassador could respond, another voice cut into the conversation. "Admiral, this is Captain Morrison aboard the New Horizon. Our colonists are requesting permission to watch the show." Elizabeth couldn't suppress a chuckle. "Tell them to stay clear of the weapons range, Captain. This might get messy." On the screen, Veltar looked increasingly agitated. "This is madness. You cannot seriously intend to fight the entire collective over one star system." "Actually, I can. But more importantly, I will." Elizabeth's voice hardened, losing all traces of amusement. "You gave us 30 days to make a decision. We've made it. The Kepler 442 system belongs to humanity, and we will defend it against any threat. The only question now is whether you're smart enough to walk away." The collective does not retreat. Then the collective is about to receive a very expensive education in modern warfare. Elizabeth gestured to Torres, who immediately cut the transmission. The screen went dark, leaving the bridge in relative quiet except for the hum of powerful engines and the soft beeping of sensor arrays. "Sir," reported Hayes, "the collective fleet is moving. They're advancing toward the system perimeter." "As expected. Signal the fleet. Weapons free, but wait for my command to engage. Let's see if they're smart enough to back down once they get a closer look at what they're facing." The human fleet adjusted its formation slightly, bringing more weapons to bear on the advancing collective ships. At this distance, the size difference between the two forces was obvious. The Zephyrian vessels outnumbered the humans by nearly 50-1. But there was something about the way the human ships moved that spoke of absolute confidence, as if they were facing a training exercise rather than a potentially deadly battle. "Admiral," Torres called out, "we're receiving a transmission from the Aquarian delegate, Counselor Theiss." Supreme Commander Overlord Kethvar stood in the command center of the Dominion's wrath, his massive form casting shadows across the tactical displays that showed both fleets moving toward their deadly rendezvous. Unlike Ambassador Veltar, Kethvar was a soldier first and had risen to his position through centuries of successful military campaigns. He understood warfare in a way that the diplomat never could, and what he understood right now terrified him. "Sir," reported his tactical officer, a nervous Zephyrian lieutenant whose armor kept shifting between colors of stress, "the human fleet has maintained perfect formation throughout their approach. No wavering, no hesitation, no attempts to withdraw." Kethvar studied the sensor readings with growing unease. In his experience, species facing impossible odds either fled immediately or made desperate, chaotic attacks that were easily repelled. But the human fleet moved with the calm precision of apex predators who had never encountered anything they couldn't kill. "What's our intelligence on their weapon systems?" he demanded. "Limited, sir. Our sensors can detect massive energy buildups in their weapon ports, but the specific technologies are unknown. The power readings are inconsistent with any known physics." That was another problem. The collective had built its military doctrine around known galactic technologies and tactical principles. Energy weapons had specific ranges and power requirements. Kinetic weapons followed predictable trajectories. Shields operated within understood parameters. The human ships seemed to ignore all of those rules. "Sir," interrupted the communications officer, "Admiral Reyes is broadcasting on all channels. Should I put it through?" "Yes." "Let's hear what she has to say." The main display activated, showing the calm face of the human admiral. Behind her, Kethvar could see the bridge of the human flagship, a space filled with technology that looked decades ahead of anything the collective possessed. "Supreme Commander," Admiral Reyes began, her voice professionally courteous, "I understand you have overall command of the collective forces in this system. I wanted to speak with you directly before this situation escalates further." Kethvar straightened to his full imposing height. "Admiral, I must admit your fleet is more impressive than our intelligence suggested. However, you still face overwhelming numerical superiority. Perhaps we can reach an accommodation." "I'm listening." "The Kepler system could be divided. Your colonists could settle the outer worlds while the collective maintains control of the primary planet and the valuable asteroid mining regions. Both our species could benefit from such an arrangement." Admiral Reyes was quiet for a moment, and Kethvar allowed himself to hope that reason might prevail. Then she spoke, and her words cut through his optimism like a blade. "Commander, let me ask you something. How many of those 47 species you conquered offered to negotiate before you destroyed them?" The question caught Kethvar off guard. That's not relevant to the current situation. I think it is. Because what you're offering me now, division of territory, shared resources, mutual benefit, that's exactly what those species probably tried to offer you. And you crushed them anyway. Kethvar felt his armor flush with anger. Those were different circumstances. Those species were primitive, barely capable of interstellar travel. And yet they were still people trying to protect their homes and their families, just like we are. The Admiral paused, and when she continued, her voice carried the weight of absolute conviction. You had 30 days to reconsider your ultimatum, Commander. You chose to maintain your position and even reinforced your fleet. Humanity does not negotiate with those who threaten our children. Before Kethvar could respond, the transmission ended. He stared at the blank screen for a moment, then turned to his tactical officer. All ships, prepare for combat. Target their flagship first. If we can destroy their command ship, the rest might surrender. Sir, his sensor officer called out urgently. I'm detecting massive energy spikes from the human fleet. All their weapons are charging simultaneously. On the display, space around the human ships began to shimmer and distort. Whatever weapons, they were powering up. They were drawing energy on a scale that made the collective's heaviest guns look like toys. That's when everything went wrong. Captain Zethlock of the collective cruiser Subjugator had been watching the human fleet with growing nervousness for the past hour. The enemy ships were smaller than his vessel, but something about their sleek, predatory design made his skin crawl. When the order came to prepare for combat, his already frayed nerves finally snapped. Fire! He screamed at his weapons officer. Fire everything! The Subjugator opened up with every weapon it possessed, sending streams of plasma and kinetic projectiles racing toward the nearest human vessel. The unauthorized attack lit up the tactical displays of both fleets, and for a moment, time seemed frozen as everyone processed what had just happened. Then the humans responded. The targeted human ship, a sleek destroyer called the Retribution, didn't even attempt to evade. Instead, it deployed what looked like a shimmering energy field around its hull. The collective's weapons struck the field and simply vanished, as if they had been absorbed into another dimension. What in the void was that? Whispered Kethvar's tactical officer. Some kind of defensive technology, Kethvar replied, but his voice lacked confidence. He'd never seen anything that could simply make weapons fire disappear. The Retribution returned fire with a single weapon that defied classification. A beam of pure energy lanced out from its forward array, struck the Subjugator and cut the massive cruiser in half with surgical precision. The two sections of the ship tumbled apart, venting atmosphere and debris, but there were no secondary explosions. Whatever the human weapon was, it had somehow bypassed the ship's power core and ammunition storage. Surgical strike, breathed the tactical officer. They disabled the ship without killing the crew. That realization sent a chill through the collective command center. It was one thing to face an enemy with superior firepower. It was something else entirely to face an enemy with such precise control over their weapons that they could disable your ship without even trying to kill you. Admiral Reyes's voice filled the communication channels again. Attention, collective fleet. That was a demonstration. Your ship fired first, and we responded with minimal force. The next ship that opens fire will not receive such consideration. Sir, reported the sensor officer, his voice shaking. The human fleet is moving into attack formation. Whatever they're planning to do, they're about to do it. Kethvar watched in fascination and growing horror as the human ships deployed with mathematical precision. The massive carriers moved to optimal launch positions while smaller vessels spread out in a pattern that would allow them to engage multiple targets simultaneously. It was like watching a chess grandmaster arrange pieces for a devastating combination. All ships maintain defensive positions, he ordered. Do not fire unless fired upon. But his captains were scared, and scared beings make poor decisions. 3 more collective vessels opened fire almost simultaneously, their crews panicking at the sight of the approaching human fleet. This time, the human response was swift and overwhelming. The human ships moved like living things, flowing around the collective's return fire with impossible grace. Their weapon systems engaged with deadly precision, each shot calculated to disable rather than destroy. Energy beams that seemed to bend space itself reached out and touched collective vessels, causing their shields to collapse and their weapons to go silent. But it was the fighters that truly demonstrated the gap between the two fleets. The human carriers launched squadrons of small craft that moved through space like schools of silver fish, darting between the massive collective ships and striking at specific targets with surgical accuracy. Each fighter seemed to possess the firepower of a collective corvette, and they moved with coordination that suggested a hive-mind level of tactical integration. "Sir," called the tactical officer, "we're losing ships faster than I can track. The humans are systematically disabling our entire fleet." On the display, Kethvar watched his mighty armada being picked apart with professional efficiency. Ships that had terrorized dozens of species were being reduced to drifting hulks by weapons they couldn't even understand. The humans weren't just winning, they were demonstrating their absolute superiority with every perfectly placed shot. "This is impossible," he muttered. "No one fights like this, no one has technology like this." "Sir," interrupted his communications officer, "we're receiving surrender signals from over half our fleet. Captain Velthek of the Iron Fist is requesting permission to withdraw. So are the commanders of Battle Groups 7, 12, and 18. Kethvar stared at the tactical display, watching centuries of collective military dominance crumble in the span of minutes. His fleet still outnumbered the humans by more than 20 to 1. But numbers meant nothing when your weapons couldn't penetrate enemy defenses and your ships moved like slugs compared to their opponents. "Open a channel to Admiral Reyes," he ordered quietly. The human admiral appeared on screen looking as calm and professional as if she were attending a routine briefing rather than commanding one of the most devastating military victories in galactic history. "Commander," she said simply. 3 months after the Battle of Kepler 442, Admiral Elizabeth Reyes stood on the observation deck of the Indomitable Will, watching the construction of humanity's first major space station outside their home system. The massive structure was taking shape with remarkable speed, built by both human crews and voluntary workers from a dozen different species who had come to assist the colonies. The irony wasn't lost on her. What the Zephyrian Collective had tried to prevent through force was now happening with the enthusiastic support of half the galaxy. "Admiral," called Commander Torres from behind her, "we're receiving another batch of diplomatic requests. The hegemony of Crix wants to establish formal trade relations. The Stellar Commonwealth is asking about mutual defense agreements, and the Aquarian Council has requested permission to establish a cultural exchange program with our colonists." Elizabeth nodded without turning around. The political ramifications of their victory were still rippling across the galaxy, creating opportunities that humanity was only beginning to understand. "What about the collective worlds?" "Mixed reactions, sir. The core worlds are still maintaining their government structure, but 17 outer colonies have declared independence. Most of them are requesting protection under human patrol routes. That was perhaps the most significant development. The Zephyrian Collective hadn't just lost a battle, they'd lost the aura of invincibility that had kept their empire together. Without the fear of overwhelming retaliation, subject worlds were discovering their courage. And the Zephyrian leadership? Silent mostly, some diplomatic feelers about establishing formal borders and non-aggression pacts, but nothing substantial, yet. Elizabeth finally turned away from the viewport, her expression thoughtful. "They're waiting to see what we do next. Whether we're going to become the new galactic bullies or something different." The bridge doors opened and Captain Sarah Chen entered, looking considerably more relaxed than she had 3 months ago. The colonial leader had become something of a celebrity throughout the galaxy, known as the woman who had faced down the Collective's ultimatum with quiet dignity. "Admiral," Sarah said with a smile, "I wanted to thank you personally before you depart. The colonists have asked me to present you with this." She handed Elizabeth a small crystal sculpture that seemed to capture light and hold it, creating the illusion of a miniature star burning within the transparent material. It was beautiful in a way that transcended species or culture. "The first crystal grown in Kepler 442 soil under Kepler 442 sunlight," Sarah explained. "The children insist it's magic. Our scientists say it's just an unusual interaction between local minerals and the star's radiation. Either way, it's unique to our new home." Elizabeth accepted the gift with genuine appreciation. "Thank you. This will have a place of honor on the flagship." "There's something else," Sarah continued, her expression becoming more serious. "We've been monitoring galactic communications, and there's a lot of chatter about what humanity is planning to do with its new military reputation. People are curious about our intentions." That was the question Elizabeth had been grappling with since the battle ended. Humanity had demonstrated that it possessed the most powerful fleet in known space, but power without purpose was just chaos waiting to happen. "What do you think we should do?" Elizabeth asked. Sarah was quiet for a moment, looking out at the construction crews working on the space station. "I think we should do exactly what we've been doing. Protect the innocent, defend the weak, and show the galaxy that strength doesn't have to mean cruelty." It was a simple philosophy, But Elizabeth had learned that the most profound truths usually were simple. "Admiral," Torres interrupted, "we're receiving a priority transmission from Earth. Fleet Command wants a status report on our patrol schedule." Elizabeth nodded. "Tell them we're proceeding as planned. The first patrol group will begin operations next week." The patrol system had been her idea, and Earth's leadership had endorsed it enthusiastically. Rather than keeping the human defense fleet concentrated in one location, they would establish regular patrol routes through previously contested regions of space. Any species threatened by aggressive neighbors could request assistance, and humanity would provide it. It wasn't conquest or empire building. It was something the galaxy hadn't seen in centuries, a powerful military force that existed to protect rather than dominate. "Sir," reported Lieutenant Hayes from the sensor station, "we have an incoming vessel requesting permission to dock. It's a Thess diplomatic courier." Elizabeth smiled. Counselor Thys had become something of an unofficial ambassador between humanity and the smaller galactic species. Her reports on the Battle of Kepler 442 had been distributed throughout Council space, and her description of human military capabilities had apparently convinced several potential aggressors to reconsider their expansion plans. "Permission granted. Send word that I'll meet with her in Conference Room Alpha." An hour later, Elizabeth found herself facing the blue-scaled Aquarian counselor across a polished table. Thys looked tired but determined, carrying herself with the weight of someone bearing important news. "Admiral," Thys began without preamble, "I bring word from the Galactic Council. There have been developments since your victory over the Collective." "What kind of developments?" "3 separate conflicts have ended through negotiated settlements rather than military action. The hegemony of Crix was preparing to invade the neutral zone, but decided against it after reviewing recordings of your fleet's capabilities. The Stellar Pirates Confederation has suspended their raids on commercial shipping, and the Dominion of Keth has agreed to honor the territorial claims of 4 species they had been pressuring to evacuate their homeworlds." Elizabeth raised an eyebrow. "Interesting. And you think our demonstration at Kepler 442 influenced these decisions?" "Admiral, there hasn't been this much peaceful resolution of conflicts in over a century. The mere possibility that humanity might intervene has made aggressive species much more willing to negotiate." That was exactly what Elizabeth had hoped would happen, but hearing it confirmed was still satisfying. "There's something else," Thys continued. "Several council members have approached me about establishing a formal relationship with humanity. They want to create a mutual defense alliance with human naval forces providing security in exchange for technological and cultural exchange. That's a significant proposal." "It is. But Admiral, there are also concerns. Some species fear that humanity might eventually become what the Collective was, a dominant power that enforces its will through superior military strength." Elizabeth leaned back in her chair, considering the counselor's words. It was a valid concern, and one that humanity would have to address carefully. "Counselor, let me tell you about human history," she said finally. "We've seen what happens when powerful nations use their strength to dominate weaker ones. We've made those mistakes ourselves, and we've learned from them. The last thing we want is to become the very thing we just defeated." "Then what do you want?" Elizabeth stood and walked to the viewport, looking out at the busy space around the growing colony. Ships from dozens of different species moved through the area, trading, exploring, and building relationships that would have been impossible under collective rule. "We want what every parent wants for their children," she said quietly. "A galaxy where they can grow up safe, where they can pursue their dreams without fear, where they can meet other species as friends rather than as conquerors or conquered." Thys joined her at the viewport. "That's a beautiful vision, Admiral. But how do we ensure it becomes reality? By never forgetting that power exists to serve others, not to serve itself. Every time we deploy our fleet, we ask ourselves one question. Are we protecting the innocent or advancing our own interests? As long as we keep asking that question, we'll stay on the right path." The counselor was quiet for several minutes, watching the peaceful activity outside. Finally, she spoke again. "The Council would like to propose a formal alliance structure. Not a military empire, but a voluntary association of species committed to mutual protection and peaceful coexistence. Would humanity be interested in leading such an organization?" Elizabeth smiled. "We'd be interested in participating in it, but we wouldn't want to lead it alone. True cooperation requires shared leadership and shared responsibility. Even though you possess the most powerful fleet, especially because we possess the most powerful fleet, military strength should serve diplomatic wisdom, not replace it." As if summoned by their conversation, Admiral Reyes's communicator chimed with an incoming message. She glanced at it, and her expression became thoughtful. Counselor, it seems we may have an opportunity to put these principles into practice. We're receiving a distress call from the Centauri Trade Union. Pirates have been attacking their commercial routes, and they're requesting assistance. Theiss looked interested. Will you respond? We'll send a patrol group to investigate. If the reports are accurate, we'll deal with the pirates. If they're not, we'll help negotiate a peaceful resolution to whatever the real problem is. Elizabeth returned to her command chair and began composing orders for the patrol group. As she worked, she reflected on how much had changed in just 3 months.